James Madison was born on March 16, 1751, and raised on a plantation inside of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. He was surrounded by 7 younger siblings who loved and respected him. James Madison loved books and the study of classical language, and by the time he entered the College of New Jersey, which later became known as Princeton, Madison had mastered Greek and Latin under direction of private tutors. He completed his college studies in 2 years, but stayed at Princeton for another term to tackle Hebrew and philosophy. James Madison had a very successful early life in the new America. At the age of 29, James Madison was the youngest member of the Continental Congress. He wrote most of the Federalist Papers, most of the Constitution, and all of the Bill of Rights. He co-founded the Democratic-Republican Party and served 2 years as Jefferson's Secretary of State. James Madison was elected president in 1808 and was re-elected in 1812. One of the biggest domestic affairs that James Madison had to deal with in his term was rechartering the National Bank, which was set to expire in 1812. However, many traditional Republicans opposed the National Bank, and so the National Bank was not rechartered until 1816, when the Second National Bank was chartered. Another big issue was the Native American threat in the Northwest Territories. With the British arming the Native Americans and new leaders springing up like Tecumseh, this threat was growing and had to be dealt with properly in order for settlers to move into the territory. Another big issue was Britain. Many issues with them caused us to declare war on them in June 1812, starting the War of 1812. One of the big issues we had with Britain that made us start the war was the continuous impressment of American sailors. Impressment is the seizing of sailors and forcing them to work for their captors. This had been a big issue since the time of Adam. America responded to the impressment of their sailors by passing acts like the Non-Intercourse Act and Macon's Bill No. 2, which blocked trade with Britain and France. Both of these acts ended in failure, as Britain continued to impress American sailors. This and other reasons led America to declare war on Britain. America's first move was to invade Canada, but that ended in disaster. By the fall of 1812, Detroit, part of New York, near Niagara Falls, and much of the Northwest Territory had fallen. Things were better for America in the spring of 1813. Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry won a major victory against the British fleet in Lake Erie. This allowed the United States government to send a force led by William Henry Harrison, who would become the 9th President of the United States, against the Native American leader Tecumseh. Tecumseh had already been a big problem for the United States before the war and was still causing havoc during the war, and this threat needed to be dealt with, which it was at the Battle of the Thames River, which ended in a slaughter for the Native American troops. This was one of the first major victories for American forces in the war. Another one came from the leader Andrew Jackson, who would become the 7th President of the United States. Andrew Jackson led a force of sea militiamen aided by Choctaw, Creek, and Cherokee allies. They slaughtered what was left of the late Tecumseh's forces at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, deep in the Mississippi Territory, present-day Alabama. Things went back in Britain's favor in the late spring of 1814. Before, they had been fighting in the Napoleonic Wars. Now, Britain had beaten Napoleon and went on the offensive. They attacked many ports along the coast, took over part of Maine, invaded Chamberlain Valley, which was held off by the American forces, and worst of all, sacked Washington, D.C. After the capital was burning, the British Army chased American forces to Fort McHenry and attacked it. Americans managed to hold the fort and force the British to give up the attack. Britain's next move was to capture New Orleans as a bargaining chip in peace negotiations. A force of 6,000 British soldiers went up against a force of 4,000 American soldiers led by Andrew Jackson. The 4,000 American soldiers beat back the British badly, but neither of the armies knew that they had just fought the battle 2 weeks after the peace treaty was signed in Ghent, Belgium. Even though the war wasn't very successful, James Madison gained much popularity from it. The war also broke the Native American threat in the Northwest Territories. Madison left the White House and retired to his Virginia plantation, Montpelier, where he spent his remaining years supervising his large plantation holdings and slaves. He had many other activities, though. High on the list of activities was at Jefferson's University of Virginia, which Jefferson founded after leaving office. Madison served on its board of visitors and succeeded Jefferson as rector or head of the university in 1826. Death took the aging president quietly at his breakfast on June 28, 1836, after having been confined to his room for chronic rheumatism and severe attacks from liver dysfunction for 6 months. Madison's legacy still lives on to this day. He had successfully decreased the threat of the Native Americans in the Northwest Territory. America had stood up to England again, securing their independence from them. Through the War of 1812, America had become a big player on the world stage. The War of 1812 led to the collapse of the Federalists, strengthening the Republican Party. New national pride led to the era of good feeling, and national borders were finally solidified. Thank you to all these sites.